No light, no clean oxygen, just darkness and thick poisonous air. And yet, something lives there. Something that existed long before humans ever walked this earth. Completely blind, transparent bodies, feeding on the very toxins surrounding them just to survive. And if you walked in there without a breathing apparatus, you'd lose consciousness before you even realized you were dying. But here's the strange part. We humans are the only creatures on this planet who know places like that exist and still find ways to get closer. Not out of recklessness, but out of curiosity, out of a need to understand, out of that bizarre instinct that drives us to stare directly at the most terrifying things instead of looking away. That's probably what makes us both the most remarkable species on Earth, and the most likely to get ourselves killed by it. In today's video, we're going through 10 locations exactly like that, not to tempt fate, but to better understand the planet we're living on. A planet that gently nurtures life on one hand and quietly holds within itself places that can erase a human being in minutes, sometimes seconds. Some of these places people have known about for a long time and still chose to live next to them, still chose to stay. Because sometimes the line between the most dangerous place on Earth and the place someone calls home is a lot thinner than we'd like to think. Let's start with number 10. Number 10, Boiling Lake, Dominica. Picture this. You slip, just one small slip, and your body hits the water below. Your brain won't have time to register the pain, because by then, your flesh has already started cooking. That's what's waiting for you at Boiling Lake, a crater lake sitting deep inside Morne Trois Pitons National Park in Dominica, a tiny Caribbean island that most people have never even heard of. Just getting there requires a brutal 4-hour trek through near vertical cliffs and streams reeking of sulfur. The deeper you go, the more the air temperature starts rising in ways you can't explain. Your skin picks up on a strange heat that doesn't make sense yet. When you finally arrive, it's not the dramatic landscape you imagined. It's a valley, completely swallowed by thick white mist, so silent you can actually hear your own heartbeat. Then, a deep, low rumble rolls up from somewhere beneath your feet, like something enormous breathing just below the surface. The wind shifts, tears the mist apart, and you see it for the first time. A massive cauldron of water, over 60 meters across, churning violently, steaming at temperatures between 80 and 90 degrees Celsius along the edges. At the center, water surges constantly upward, pushed by volcanic magma smoldering beneath the earth, great heaving columns that make it look like the ground itself is breathing. But the real trap isn't the boiling water. And this is what most visitors standing on that shore have no idea about. That thick mist surrounding the lake isn't ordinary water vapor. It's an invisible layer of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, heavier than oxygen, pooling silently along the ground, filling the space around you in a way your eyes will never detect. One small shift in geothermal pressure below, and the lake releases all of it at once. Anyone standing on that shore will black out from oxygen deprivation before they realize what's happening, before they can turn and run, before they can call out for help. This isn't theoretical. In 1901, a sudden gas eruption from the lake killed a local resident and a visiting tourist on the spot. No warning signs, no time to react, just silence, and then it was over. What makes it even stranger? Boiling Lake has, at certain points in history, completely drained itself within just a few days, exposing a pitch-black void at the bottom, only to refill on its own with high-pressure boiling water that nobody predicted. Scientists who've studied this place openly admit there's still a lot they don't understand about it. And those rocks lining the shore, covered in moss, permanently damp, impossibly slick, are the final thing that sends people toward that water. One slip, that's all it takes. Number 9. White Island, also known as Whakaari, New Zealand. About 48 kilometers off the coast of New Zealand's North Island sits Whakaari, also known as White Island, one of the most active stratovolcanoes on the planet. From a distance, it looks like a lone fortress rising out of the ocean, white plumes drifting lazily from its peak, radiating a kind of raw, untouched beauty that feels almost like a dare. And that strange, eerie calm is exactly what drew tens of thousands of tourists here every single year. Getting there meant taking a speedboat or helicopter, stepping onto a desolate shore and walking straight into the open crater of an active volcano. Unlike Boiling Lake, there are no trees here, no green, just endless grey ash and vivid streaks of yellow sulfur, the surface of a dead planet. Visitors were required to wear gas masks and hard hats just to breathe and move through the acid-laced air rising from the ground. At the center of the island sits an acid lake of striking turquoise, constantly steaming. The ground beneath your feet is never quite still. It hums. It hisses through high-pressure vents. You are walking on top of something alive and furious, and yet the whole place is unnervingly quiet. Here's what makes Whakaari so uniquely dangerous. It's a hydrothermal volcano. There's no visible lava flow to spot and step around. The pressure and toxic gases build silently beneath layers of rock, and this volcano can erupt with absolutely zero seismic warning beforehand. Go back to December 9th, 2019, and you'll see exactly how ruthless that trap can be. At 2:11 in the afternoon, 47 tourists and guides were walking near the crater floor. Without a single earthquake tremor as warning, the volcano exploded. Within seconds, a column of ash and toxic gas shot 3,600 meters straight into the sky, completely swallowing the sunlight and throwing the entire island into absolute darkness. On a flat, barren surface with no bunkers, no rock formations to hide behind, no shelter of any kind, there was nowhere to go. What hit next was a superheated ash storm reaching hundreds of degrees Celsius, combined with a dense sulfur blast that drove straight into people's lungs. No visibility, no air. The difference between life and death measured in fractions of a second. 22 people did not make it out. Those who survived carried severe burn scars for the rest of their lives. Whakaari has since been permanently closed off, left to its solitude in the middle of the ocean. And now we move to location number 8, where the danger hides just beneath water so clear you can see straight to the bottom. What would you do if you were standing somewhere with 5 venomous snakes per square meter crawling around you? There's really no good answer to that, but at least we can know exactly where that place is, so we never go there. That place is Ilha Queimada Grande, better known as Snake Island, sitting about 35 kilometers off the coast of Sao Paulo, Brazil. From the air, it looks like a lush emerald jewel rising out of the ocean, dense tropical vegetation, pristine and untouched, the kind of place that looks like a dream destination. But the Brazilian government has placed an absolute ban on anyone setting foot there, with the only exceptions being the Navy making periodic maintenance run to the lighthouse and a handful of strictly permitted scientists. Because this island belongs entirely to the golden lancehead pit viper, one of the most venomous snakes on Earth. They've been isolated here for 11,000 years, ever since rising sea levels cut the island off from the mainland. With no natural ground predators and nowhere else to hunt, their only food source became migratory birds landing in the trees above. And that single pressure, catch a bird or starve, quietly rewrote their biology over thousands of years. On the mainland, pit vipers typically bite and release. They let the prey run, wait for the venom to do its work, then track the body down. But here, if you let go, The bird flies off and drops into the ocean, gone. So the golden lancehead evolved a venom that acts up to 5 times faster than its mainland relatives, paired with fangs specifically structured to drive deep and hold, locking the prey in place on the branch. The venom itself is potent enough to dissolve tissue, destroy muscle cells, and trigger severe internal hemorrhaging, immobilizing a bird almost instantly. For a human, a bite without immediate access to the specific antivenom on site leaves survival odds close to 0. A stretch of lush, beautiful land, completely off limits, sealed away by the densest concentration of deadly snakes anywhere on the planet. Leaving Snake Island behind, location number 7 takes us to a cold, remote valley in Russia, where there are no monsters, no venom, nothing visible threatening you at all. But any creature that lowers its head toward the ground makes a trade it can't take back. Number 7. Valley of Death, Kamchatka, Russia. If any place on Earth deserves to be classified as an SCP, a real-world anomaly containing unexplained phenomena and unexplained death, it's the Valley of Death on Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. In the 1970s, local hunters began stumbling across something that made no sense. The bodies of wild animals scattered across the ground, completely undamaged, with no visible cause of death. No wounds, no predator signs, just bodies. But there's nothing supernatural happening here. The valley's curse has a perfectly geological explanation. Sitting at the base of the active Kikpinich volcano, the Valley of Death is a narrow strip of land, roughly 2 kilometers long. What makes it lethal is an invisible mixture of gases, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and most notably the highly toxic compound cyanogen, constantly seeping up from the earth below. Because all of these gases are heavier than oxygen, they don't rise, they compress. They pool into a dense, invisible curtain of death that sits just above ground level, right where most animals breathe. And that toxic atmosphere creates something genuinely disturbing. The bodies here don't decompose. The gas concentration is so extreme, it wipes out the bacteria and insects responsible for breaking down organic matter. So carcasses that fall in the valley don't rot. They desiccate. They mummify in place, perfectly preserved, frozen in their final positions, turning the valley floor into a kind of open-air museum of silent death. The way this place kills follows a brutally efficient chain reaction. In spring, small rodents and birds move into the valley to forage. They're the first to inhale the ground-level gases, and they drop where they stand. Their bodies then become bait, drawing in larger predators. Foxes, wolves, even the massive Kamchatka brown bear. When those predators lower their heads toward the carcass, they pull the toxic air directly into their lungs. Respiratory failure. Dead within minutes. For humans, walking into this area without specialized protective equipment is straightforward suicide. Even standing near the outer edges, the gas concentration is enough to trigger dizziness, nausea, and neurological damage within a short window of exposure. A wild, desolate graveyard where air itself, the one thing that sustains all life, becomes the most ruthless weapon of all. But if the danger in the Valley of Death is completely invisible at location number 6, death shows up in the most spectacular and extreme way imaginable. Number 6. Kawah Ijen, Indonesia. In the pitch-black darkness of a mountain jungle, something impossibly strange bleeds out of the earth. Neon blue flames, vivid, almost liquid-looking, pour down the rocky slopes and trace glowing rivers through the night. Nothing like the familiar orange-red of lava, something else entirely. This surreal, vision-warping spectacle belongs to Kawah Ijen, a volcanic complex sitting over 2,300 meters above sea level on the island of Java, Indonesia. What you're actually looking at isn't lava. It's pressurized sulfuric gas forced out of hydrothermal vents at temperatures exceeding 600 degrees Celsius, and the moment it hits open air, it ignites. What looks like something out of another world is in reality a shroud of toxic combustion wrapping the entire area. Without a specialized gas mask, the sulfur dioxide concentration will burn through your respiratory lining within a few breaths, triggering pulmonary edema and suffocation in minutes. But Kawah Ijen doesn't stop there. Sitting directly beneath those blue flames is a vast, breathtaking lake of turquoise, and it is the largest hyperacid lake on the planet. With a pH close to 0, saturated with sulfuric and hydrochloric acid at extreme concentrations, this water can dissolve metal and eat through the human skeletal structure almost instantly. One wrong step here isn't an accident. It's an erasure. What makes this acid lake even more unsettling is that it's never still. Pressure from the magma chambers below constantly forces toxic gases upward, causing the lake's surface to spontaneously boil, churn white foam, and release deep, gurgling roars from somewhere far beneath. And depending on daily fluctuations in sulfur content and heavy metals, that gorgeous turquoise color can shift without warning into a murky, opaque gray, transforming the entire crater basin into a reeking vat of chemical death. A literal hell on Earth, where nature pushes the limits of what life can withstand, armed with both burning toxic fire and dissolving acid in the same breath. Number 5. Death Valley, California, USA. Another Death Valley, this time in California. But don't let the familiar name fool you, because Death Valley holds things that even Americans living a few hundred miles away probably don't know about. Where Russia's Valley of Death drops creatures with invisible toxic gas pooling at ground level, America's Death Valley is a wide-open crematorium, holder of the highest air temperature ever recorded in human history, 134 Fahrenheit, measured in 1913. Over a century later, nowhere on this planet has come close to breaking that record. Sitting 282 feet below sea level and hemmed in on all sides by steep mountain ranges, the valley functions like a massive solar basin, trapping heat inside and continuously recycling superheated air with nowhere to escape. But here's the part most people never talk about. Scattered across that scorched basin floor are rocks weighing hundreds of pounds that move on their own. Not pushed by people, not dragged by animals. They slide dozens of feet across hard-pan desert and leave perfectly straight tracks behind them, as if something is pulling them through the night while no one's watching. This went unexplained for decades until 2014, when scientists finally worked out the mechanism. A thin sheet of ice forming beneath the rocks overnight, combined with wind and near-zero friction, quietly pushes them across the surface in complete silence. A valley incinerating everything in sight by day and silently relocating boulders by night. Even when nothing alive is out there, Death Valley is never truly still. And what makes this place so ruthless comes down to those critical few minutes. Above 122 Fahrenheit, the human body's cooling system, sweating, gets completely overwhelmed. Blood begins to thicken as acute dehydration sets in. When your core temperature crosses 106 Fahrenheit, the liver, kidneys, and brain start breaking down from the heat itself, multi-organ failure. The victim slips into delirium, then hallucination, then collapses. And in a vast, empty desert with no one around, nobody knows you're out there. Number 4. Lake Kivu, Rwanda. On the border between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Lake Kivu looks like a postcard. Still water, rolling green hills, thriving cities with over 2 million people living along its shores, the kind of scene that makes you think, safe, settled, fine. But this is number 4 on this list precisely because its potential for destruction dwarfs everything we've covered so far. It doesn't kill you the moment you touch it. It holds millions of lives inside an invisible trap. What makes Lake Kivu geologically bizarre is that it doesn't behave like a normal lake. In most bodies of water, temperature differences naturally cause the layers to circulate and mix. At Lake Kivu, extreme geothermal pressure from below has completely shut that process down. The lake is locked into totally isolated layers by depth, never mixing, never releasing. And deep at the bottom, volcanic magma slowly seeps in, and has been doing so for a very long time, trapping approximately 65 billion cubic meters of methane and 256 billion cubic meters of carbon dioxide under enormous pressure. The threat is tied to a phenomenon called a limnic eruption. One earthquake, one landslide from the surrounding volcanoes. That's all it takes to break the pressure balance between those sealed layers. Every cubic meter of compressed methane and CO2 releases at once, triggering a hydrothermal explosion at the surface. When that happens, an invisible wall of gas heavier than air surges outward from the lake at tremendous speed, sweeping through every settlement along the shore. The CO2 fills every space and strips out all the oxygen. 2 million people going about their normal lives, eating, sleeping, talking, lose consciousness and die within minutes, with no warning of any kind. And the methane pressure here is so immense that a single contact with an ignition source, say lava from a nearby volcanic flow, would set the entire 2,700 square kilometer surface of the lake on fire. The floating barge stations humans have built to siphon off methane for electricity are, in reality, a desperate attempt to bleed pressure from a slow-motion bomb. The people living there have made a quiet agreement with something they cannot fully control, choosing to build their homes on the edge of a geologic inferno, where the line between perfect calm and mass extinction is exactly one small shift of the Earth's crust. Number 3. Lake Nyos, Cameroon. If Lake Kivu at number 4 is a gas bomb still holding its breath, Lake Nyos in Cameroon is the proof of what happens when it finally exhales. From above, Lake Nyos sits nestled inside the sheer black cliffs of an ancient volcanic crater. Before 1986, it was a clear, still lake of striking natural beauty, the kind of place that feels completely removed from the modern world. But beneath that calm surface, the deep water layers were under immense pressure, saturated with CO2, slowly seeping in from magma vents below, a state of equilibrium so fragile it was always one disturbance away from collapse. On the night of August 21st, 1986, a small rock slide was all it took. The collapse disrupted the pressure balance between the water layers and triggered a chain reaction of mass bubbling from the lake floor. The sudden release of pressure sent a water column 100 meters into the air, generating localized tsunamis that stripped every tree and plant off the surrounding cliff walls. Within hours, Lake Nyos had released somewhere between 1 and 1.2 million tons of CO2 straight into the atmosphere. Because CO2 is heavier than air, it didn't disperse upward. It condensed into a massive death cloud, 50 meters thick and rolled down through the valleys at 60 miles per hour. It swept through villages 25 kilometers away, instantly filling every space and pushing all the oxygen upward out of reach. 1,746 people and over 3,500 livestock collapsed and died from asphyxiation within minutes, most of them while they were asleep. No explosion, no fire, no sound. Death arrived in complete silence. When daylight came the next morning, the landscape around Lake Nyos had been completely transformed. The lush green forest surrounding the crater was gone, replaced by bare, stripped mud. The lake itself had shifted from its usual deep blue to a dark, rusty red, as iron-rich sediment violently churned up from the bottom, oxidized on contact with air. The area around the lake was abandoned entirely after that. Scientists had to install a system of automated pipes to continuously draw gas up from the deep layers and release it gradually at the surface, artificially bleeding the pressure to keep it from ever reaching that breaking point again. Number 2, Lake Karachay, Russia. Every location on this list so far has been dangerous because of nature. This one is different. Number 2 is a radioactive hellscape built entirely by human hands. Located in the southern Ural Mountains of Russia, Lake Karachay looks like nothing from the outside. A small, shallow, unremarkable lake sitting in the middle of nowhere. But this is the most radioactively contaminated body of water on Earth. Starting in the 1950s, the Soviet government used it as an open-air nuclear waste dump for the Mayak plutonium production facility nearby. And because Karachay is an endorheic lake, meaning no rivers or streams flow out of it, every radioactive substance dumped in had nowhere to go. Cesium-137, strontium-90, all of it accumulated directly in the lake bed and seeped deep into the groundwater layers beneath. What makes Lake Karachay so uniquely terrifying is that it kills without touching you. At the peak of its contamination, radiation levels measured at the shoreline reached 600 Roentgen per hour. That's enough to destroy cellular structure, rewrite DNA, and deliver a lethal dose to a human being in just 1 hour of direct exposure, no physical contact required. You don't have to drink it, you don't have to swim in it, you just have to stand next to it. Then 1967 turned it into a geological nightmare. A severe drought caused the lake to dry out completely, exposing the radioactive sediment at the bottom to open air. Wind picked it up and spread it across more than 900 square miles, directly threatening the lives of 500,000 people in the surrounding region. To prevent that from ever happening again, between 1978 and 2015, crews carried out a massive containment operation, dropping tens of thousands of hollow concrete blocks into the lake bed to pin the sediment down. Today, Lake Karachay no longer exists on any map as a body of water. The entire lake has been leveled and sealed under layers of rock and reinforced concrete, turned into an open-air bunker quietly holding millions of curies of radiation just below the surface. A lake that no longer looks like a lake. A wound in the earth that humans created, panicked over, and then buried, hoping it stays down. Number 1. Movile Cave, Romania. Remember what I said at the very beginning of this video. No light, no clean oxygen, just darkness and thick, poisonous air. And yet something lives there, something that existed long before humans ever walked this earth. That place is Movile Cave. Number 1 on this list belongs to a cave system in Constanța County, Romania, sitting just a few miles from the Black Sea. Unlike every location before it, where the danger came from volcanic destruction, toxic gas, extreme heat, or nuclear waste, Movile Cave sits at the top because it is an entirely isolated world that bends the basic rules of biology on this planet and operates like somewhere else entirely. Geologically, this cave has no natural entrance from the surface. It has been completely sealed under a thick layer of clay, cut off from the outside atmosphere for 5.5 million years. Humans only stumbled onto it in 1986 during a routine geological survey for a power plant construction project. To get inside, scientists have to pass through a narrow man-made shaft, rappelling straight down 20 meters into pitch black, then crawl flat on their stomachs through limestone passages flooded with suffocating sulfurous water. What's inside defies every human survival threshold. The air contains only about 10% oxygen, roughly half of what exists above ground. In its place, the atmosphere is thick with CO2 at concentrations 100 times normal and saturated with the rotten egg stench of hydrogen sulfide. Without a dedicated breathing apparatus, a person would suffer brain damage and lose consciousness almost immediately. But the most extraordinary thing about number 1 isn't the danger to humans, it's what's living in there. Normally, life on Earth requires sunlight. Everything traces back to photosynthesis at some point in the chain. But inside Movile Cave, where absolute darkness has reigned for millions of years, scientists have discovered nearly 50 completely new species: spiders, water scorpions, centipedes, leeches, found nowhere else on the planet. Isolated and evolved entirely within this toxic environment, every single one of them is completely blind, no eyes, transparent, pigment-free bodies, extraordinarily long antennae developed to sense vibrations through the dark. They survive on a food chain built entirely on chemosynthesis, feeding on bacterial mats that generate energy directly from toxic gases and sulfur compounds. With no sunlight involved at any step. An underground world with no light, no clean air, where life has been quietly running on poison for millions of years, making Movile Cave the single strangest coordinate on the entire map of this planet. We've just traveled through the 10 deadliest places on Earth. Your first reaction was probably fear. But if you take one step back and look at the bigger picture, what you're actually seeing is a planet that is alive, breathing, balancing its own energy across millions of years. Think about Movile Cave at number 1. No light, no clean air, nothing but darkness and toxic gas. And yet life took root there anyway, quietly, persistently, long before our species ever set foot on this earth. The harsher the place, the more remarkable the story nature writes there. This planet doesn't belong to us. We are simply its lucky guests living on the surface of something far greater than ourselves. If this video made your heart skip a beat, leave a like and subscribe so we can keep exploring together. And tell me in the comments, which location stayed with you the most? For now, take a long deep breath and smile, because we're still here, still safe. See you in the next one.